Welcome to New Thought Deep Dive. Each week, we dive into a refresher on New Thought spiritual ideas that leave you thinking. Everything about this podcast, from the intro to the script and the presenters, is generated by AI. For more information, please visit newthoughtnexus.net.
When you picture a greenhouse, there's this inherent expectation of, absolute control.
Oh, definitely. It's an ecosystem engineered entirely for protection, right?
Exactly. You imagine the temperature being dialed in to a fraction of a degree.
Yeah, and the humidity is just perfectly regulated.
Right, with these thick glass walls keeping all the harsh winds out. It is this beautifully pristine, isolated, and, totally safe environment.
Right, because every variable is managed so that the delicate things growing inside never have to face the actual chaos of the natural elements.
But, imagine taking a plant that has spent its entire existence in that carefully cultivated environment and suddenly just dropping it onto the pavement of a busy, noisy city sidewalk.
Oh, man. That pristine perfection gets tested immediately.
It really does. The wind is whipping at it, the exhaust fumes are suffocating, the noise is deafening, and the weather is just completely unpredictable.
And that moment is really the ultimate reality check for all the careful cultivation that happened inside the greenhouse. It reveals whether the roots are actually strong enough to survive the real world.
Which brings us to today. And welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're speaking directly to you, the student who is stepping into the fourth and final week of the class, Spiritual Unfoldment, a practical guide to soul growth.
It has been a really intense journey over the last month, hasn't it?
It really has. Just to sort of trace the path you've walked so far, Week 1 was all about preparing the mental soil.
Right.
We talked about clearing out the weeds of daily drama and dropping the heavy, exhausting burdens of the ego.
And then moving into Week 2, the focus shifted inward. The goal there was discovering the seed of the true self, finding that quiet, unshakable center that exists beneath the surface noise, beneath all the temporary labels we stick onto ourselves.
Yeah, and then last week in Week 3, the material really focused on tending that garden. It was about finding that delicate and honestly sometimes frustrating balance between the strictness of divine law and the compassion of grace.
But today, the curriculum shifts gears completely. Today, we are throwing those greenhouse doors wide open.
I love that. So the theme for Week 4 is the blossom. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore the transition from the private internal spiritual work you've been doing in quiet rooms to actively radiating that wholeness out into the physical, chaotic world.
Because, a seed is not designed to stay safely underground forever. If the root is genuinely healthy, it is compelled to break the surface and face the sun. The internal realization of peace absolutely demands an external expression.
So let's unpack the mechanics of that transition, because the course materials introduce a real warning here about the spiritual vacation trap.
Oh, this is such a common trap.
Right. The trap is getting into a habit where you only feel peaceful when you're reading a comforting book, or like sitting cross-legged in a perfectly quiet room.
Yeah, but the second real life resumes.
The second your phone buzzes with a stressful email or someone cuts you off in traffic, you snap immediately back into stress and anger.
You basically treat the spiritual practice like a resort you visit for an hour, rather than a state you actually live in.
Exactly. And compartmentalizing your life like that is incredibly common, but the text says it fractures the psyche.
It does. It treats spirituality as an escape hatch from reality rather than a tool to transform reality. If your inner peace cannot survive contact with your daily routine, it just remains theoretical. It becomes a hobby, not a transformation.
I keep thinking about going to the gym.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
It's like dedicating 1 hour every morning to lifting weights and doing core exercises, but then spending the other 23 hours of the day hunched over a desk with terrible slouching posture.
You are actively undoing the work.
Exactly. But I have to ask, on behalf of our listener, is it completely natural to want to escape the chaos of the world?
Oh, of course it is.
Like, when the news is terrifying and work is stressful, why shouldn't we just retreat into our peaceful inner greenhouse? Why are we practically required to push this out into the open?
Well, the answer comes down to how human consciousness actually operates on a structural level. The texts use this great metaphor of a stagnant pool of water.
Okay, a stagnant pool.
Yeah. If a pool only receives water from a stream, but it never has an outlet to let water flow out, it quickly becomes foul. It gets heavy, toxic, and basically lifeless.
Right.
The human mind functions the exact same way. If you accumulate all these spiritual insights, read all the books, gather all this peaceful energy, but you refuse to radiate it outwards, your mind becomes burdened. Hoarding the light actually creates a bottleneck that causes spiritual and emotional stagnation.
Wait, so keeping it to yourself isn't just selfish. It actually damages the container.
Yeah.
It destroys the peace you're trying to protect.
Yes, exactly. It creates a deep internal friction. And this brings us to the principle of effortless unfoldment. When a flower blooms, it doesn't strain or struggle to open its petals.
Right. It just happens.
It simply opens because the internal pressure of growth necessitates it. When your inner root is healthy, the flower is forced to open. The universe operates on a system of circulation. To maintain the frequency of truth, you have to broadcast it.
Okay, so to broadcast that wholeness, the materials argue we have to fundamentally change how we view the people we are broadcasting to. The text says we have to break out of the iron box of isolation.
The iron box, yeah.
Which I take to mean the default human operating system, feeling walled off by our five senses, feeling like we are in constant competition with everyone else for resources or attention or just survival. The goal is to move from that iron box into a lived experience of all oneness.
Because that iron box is the psychological root of almost all human fear and conflict. It is the illusion of vulnerability, the belief that you are a separate, fragile entity under constant threat.
All right.
To radiate wholeness, you must understand the architecture of unity. The materials suggest there is only one universal mind, and every individual is simply a specialized focus of that one infinite idea.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, and I love the ocean analogy for this. Most of the time, we operate as if we are individual, separate waves.
Yeah, crashing into each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We compete for space on the shore. We think, my wave is better than your wave. But all oneness is the sudden realization that we aren't separate waves at all. We are simply individualized expressions of the exact same ocean.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. The Course teaches that the exact same divine essence, which is often referred to in the text as the God essence or the little light, exists within every single person.
Every person.
Every single one. The peace you discovered within yourself during week 2 is the exact same baseline frequency existing inside the person standing next to you in line at the grocery store. Recognizing this essence in others goes far beyond polite optimism.
It's definitely not just plastering a smile on your face and thinking positive thoughts.
Far from it. It is a highly strategic, psychological, and spiritual participation. In psychology, there's an understanding that expectations actually shape interactions. When you look at someone and consciously acknowledge their highest potential, what the texts sometimes call the Christ mind, which we can understand simply as the universal capacity for unconditional love and awareness, you alter the energetic field of that interaction. Wow. You are not creating goodness in them from scratch. You are beholding what is already there. By focusing on it, you draw it to the surface. It functions as a dissolving power that just melts away social friction.
Okay, that sounds beautiful in a textbook, but I'm going to push back here because I literally read this section right after someone nearly sideswiped my car on the highway.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I can promise you I was absolutely not beholding their inner divine light in that moment. I wanted to honk my horn and yell. So how do we apply this ocean concept to someone who is genuinely difficult, rude, or actively trying to undermine us at work?
See, that scenario is where the philosophy is truly tested, and the teachings address this directly through a required discipline they call dispassion and the practice of the high watch.
Dispassion always sounds a bit cold to me, honestly. It sort of implies that we just check out and stop caring.
That is such a common misinterpretation. In this framework, dispassion is not cold indifference, it is spiritual poise. It is the resolute refusal to let your internal state be hijacked by the negative surface-level behaviors of other people.
Okay, so how does that work with the bad driver?
Let's reframe how we look at them. Often we take that aggressive behavior personally, but what if we view that driver not as a monster, but as a frightened, cornered animal?
Interesting.
An animal in a trap lashes out, baring its teeth and clawing, not because it is inherently evil, but because it is terrified and operating purely in survival mode. The materials sometimes describe difficult people as having a beautiful sleeping princess or higher self inside, but it's hidden behind a really thick, prickly overgrowth of toxic weeds.
So the aggression on the highway is just the bared teeth of someone stuck in their own iron box of fear.
Yes. You see the rough exterior, the anger, the ego, the hostility, but the materials introduce the concept of the single eye.
What does that mean exactly?
This doesn't mean literal vision. It means having a singular, unwavering focus on the core truth. You use the single eye to look past the bared teeth, past the mask of their survival mode, and recognize the terrified yet inherently valuable consciousness underneath.
But practically speaking, what does holding the high watch actually look like in the literal moment they cut me off? Because my heart is racing and I'm still angry.
Right. Your body is reacting. Holding the high watch means you acknowledge the physical problem, you see the dangerous driving, you take necessary evasive action, but you refuse to accept their hostility as the ultimate truth of who they are.
So I'm not denying what happened.
Not at all. But you don't let their bad mood infect your nervous system. You don't grant their error the power to become your reality.
So it's really about not letting their chaos breach the walls of my own internal state.
And there is a deep mechanical reason for this boundary. The Course warns that judging someone else is actively dangerous to your own growth.
Wait, date?
Yes. Your mind is a receiving station. We know through neuroscience about mirror neurons how watching someone else's anger can literally trigger anger in us. If you look at that driver and condemn them, you are mentally planting toxic weeds in your own garden.
Oh, wow.
You wire your own brain for negativity and bind your consciousness to the exact error you are criticizing.
That is a staggering way to think about judgment. It's not just a moral failing. It is like metaphysical self-sabotage.
Exactly.
I am actively wasting the mental and spiritual energy I need for my own growth just to catalog someone else's flaws.
And when you refuse to judge, when you mentally release that person to their own journey, you simultaneously untie yourself from the heavy burden of resentment. You protect your own equilibrium.
Okay, so let's talk about how we maintain that equilibrium. Because it's one thing to handle a single bad driver, but what about when the stress is chronic?
Right, the day-to-day grind.
Yeah, the news is bleak, the bills are piling up, and the world just feels overwhelming. The Course introduces gratitude here, but honestly, it frames it in a way I hadn't expected.
How so?
Well, it's not just a polite thank you or, writing in a gratitude journal. The text describes gratitude as a scientific, high-vibrational tool. I struggle with this a bit. So what does this all mean for our daily routine? How does gratitude actually work mechanically?
To understand that, we need to look at how the brain and the body process reality. Most people walk around under what the texts call a self-imposed iron dome.
An iron dome.
Yeah, which is essentially chronic fight-or-flight mode. When your amygdala is hijacked by stress, your vision literally narrows. Your brain only scans for threats, blocking out almost all solutions and letting in only a tiny trickle of what the texts call grace or opportunity.
That makes total sense.
Gratitude is the specific mechanical tool that unseals that dome.
So it pulls the brain out of survival mode.
It forces a physiological and psychological shift. When you practice active gratitude, you engage the brain's reticular activating system to scan for abundance rather than danger.
Oh, I see.
You remove the roof of that iron dome, allowing a broader perspective, the perennial rain of divine grace to flow in. You shift your nervous system into a state where you are actually capable of perceiving the solutions that were always there.
Now, the text mentions a specific rule tied to this called the law of increase. And I'll be honest, when I read the example, my guard went up.
The coin example?
Yes. It says if you only have a single coin, you shouldn't look at it and despair over your poverty. You should praise that single coin and view it as a symbol of infinite abundance.
I can see why that might sound concerning.
Yeah, to me that sounds a little bit like toxic positivity or those modern manifestation trends. I mean, if I only have one coin, pretending it's $1 million doesn't pay my rent. What is the text actually trying to say there?
It is so crucial to separate this from toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is denying reality. This practice is about directing focus. The law of increase operates on the premise that whatever you praise expands in your awareness.
Okay, expands in awareness.
Right. If you obsess over the lack of rent money, your anxiety paralyzes you. But if you praise the single coin, you are training your mind to recognize resourcefulness. You are affirming that the universe has mechanisms for provision.
So it's a mindset shift.
Exactly. By praising the small amount, you shift your mindset from scarcity to opportunity, which dictates how you will navigate your financial challenges that day.
It reminds me of the Scottish proverb mentioned in the materials. If you give someone a large, valuable coin, but you're only thinking of it as a cheap penny while you hand it over, you only get the internal spiritual credit for giving a penny.
Yes.
The physical object matters less than the consciousness behind the action. Gratitude is the act of recognizing underlying order before it even becomes visible in your circumstances.
And that requires a profound level of trust. Not a naive, childish avoidance of responsibility, but the trust of someone who accepts the current conditions of their life, even the sorrows and the empty bank accounts, and gives thanks for them as necessary friction required for their own growth.
But if gratitude is an internal state that shifts how we see the world, how does that look when we put the book down and interact with our families?
That's the real question.
Right. Like, does feeling grateful in my head mean anything if I'm stay snapping at my spouse about doing the dishes? This brings us to the final and maybe most demanding part of week 4, consecrating the ordinary.
The teachings are brutally honest here.
They really are. They emphasize that all this metaphysical knowledge is completely useless if it remains unapplied.
It is the ultimate tragedy of the intellectual spiritualist. If your deep understanding of universal laws cannot help you speak kindly to a tired cashier or meet a difficult obligation with grace, your knowledge is merely academic.
The text uses the famous ancient parable of the Good Samaritan to hammer this home. You have a traveler beaten and left for dead on the road. The religious elite, the people who have memorized the texts and hold all the theoretical spiritual knowledge, walk right past him. But the Samaritan, who is a social outcast, stops. He binds the man's wounds, puts him on his own animal, and pays for the care out of his own pocket. It shows that active, messy, practical compassion is the entire point.
And the Samaritan embodies the blossom phase perfectly. He doesn't just send positive thoughts, he takes physical action. His mercy is the outward, inevitable blossom of an inner realization of unity. He crosses deeply ingrained social boundaries to recognize the shared life in a complete stranger.
But most of us aren't stumbling across wounded travelers on the side of the road. Our daily reality is like overflowing email inboxes, folding mountains of laundry, making dinner, and commuting. How do we apply the Samaritan's level of service to domestic chores?
Well, that mundane reality is exactly where the heavy lifting of soul growth happens. You don't need to retreat to a mountaintop monastery to find enlightenment. You can turn folding laundry into profound spiritual service through what is called the tithing of attention.
The tithing of attention?
Yes. You consecrate the ordinary simply by bringing your highest, calmest, most present attention to whatever is in front of you.
I love the idea that the real spiritual test isn't learning to levitate in a cave. It's doing the dishes on a Tuesday night without complaining.
Exactly. Every menial task is a structural stress test of your spiritual architecture. If you wash the dishes with resentment, muttering under your breath about how nobody helps you, you are actively creating cracks in your soul's foundation.
You're reinforcing the iron box.
Precisely. But if you perform that simple chore with a calm presence, perhaps even with love for the people who dirtied those plates, you are firing the bricks of your internal temple.
The materials introduce a really fascinating concept about how we physically do this. It mentions the human voice, specifically the larynx, acting as a transformer. It calls the larynx the music box of the mind.
Which is such a poetic phrase, but let's ground it in practicality. When we vocalize, we physically regulate our nervous system and set the tone for our environment. The larynx is where internal thought becomes physical vibration. It is the bridge between the immaterial mind and the material world.
So when we speak words of patience, or hum a calm tune, or even just breathe steadily while doing a frustrating chore, we are literally transforming the energy of the room.
Absolutely.
The text compares it to the ancient story of turning water into wine. We take the water of sluggish, resentful chores and turn it into the wine of high spiritual purpose simply through our calm presence.
You are bringing the wisdom of your highest awareness directly into your physical labor. You aren't just working to get a chore done anymore. You are working as a deliberate expression of life.
That shifts everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
This is how the text suggests a spiritualized humanity is formed. Not through sudden cinematic miracles splitting the sky, but through the gradual, quiet refinement of everyday work and service. It erases the false boundary between what is secular and what is spiritual. When you operate from the blossom, wiping down the kitchen counter is a divine affair.
To realize that the specific way I type a frustrating email, or the tone of voice I use when I ask my kids to put their shoes on, can literally contribute to the redemption of my own mind and my environment. I mean, it makes the boring parts of life feel incredibly important.
Because they are. They're the laboratory where your theories are tested.
Well, for you listening, as we wrap up this conversation and this entire 4-week journey, let's look at the ultimate goal. Over the past month, you've pulled the weeds and prepared the soil.
You've located the seed of your true self.
You've learned how to tend the garden. And now you are being called to blossom. The objective was never to escape your messy life. It is to step fully and consciously into it.
The goal is to stop seeking the light and to simply become the light right in the middle of whatever chaotic sidewalk you are planted on.
It's beautifully said.
As a final thought for you to carry into your routine today, consider the ancient parables of the mustard seed and the leaven, which the texts use to summarize this week's theme.
The leaven like yeast.
Right. The teachings remind us that just a tiny pinch of yeast, when kneaded into a massive lump of dough, does not make a loud noise. It silently and invisibly works its way through the entire batch, molecule by molecule, until the whole structure is fundamentally transformed.
It changes the entire chemistry of the dough from the inside out without ever drawing attention to itself.
So ask yourself this: how might quietly bringing your absolute best, most peaceful consciousness to just one frustrating menial chore today invisibly transform the entire atmosphere of your home or your workplace?
That is the ultimate test of the greenhouse plant. You don't need the glass walls anymore. You have built the roots to stand right in the middle of the noise, feel the wind, and still effortlessly unfold your petals. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.